Frederick Douglass was born in 1818, though he never knew the exact date. Slaves weren't given such privileges as birthdays. His mother, Harriet Bailey, would walk miles through the night just to hold him for a few short hours before dawn. She whispered his name in the darkness, Frederick, before disappearing back into the shadows. He barely knew her, and then, one day, she was gone forever. He grew up on a plantation in Maryland, where hunger gnawed at his stomach, and the lash of the overseer was as constant as the sun. He saw things no child should ever see, men and women bent and broken, the cries of the beaten, the silence of the defeated, but even then he felt that something was wrong. At the age of 8, his life changed. He was sent to Baltimore to serve the Auld family. There he met Sophia Auld, a woman who had never owned a slave before. She looked at him not as property, but as a boy. One day she handed him a book and began to teach him the alphabet. It was a small act of kindness, but it was dangerous. Her husband soon discovered what she was doing. He ripped the book from Frederick's hands and thundered, "If you teach that boy to read, he will become unfit for slavery." Frederick never forgot those words. They burned inside him, a truth more powerful than any whip. If knowledge was dangerous, then he would seek it out. He taught himself in secret, reading scraps of newspapers, borrowing books from white children in the neighborhood. He traced letters in the dust with his fingers, desperate to understand the world that had been kept from him. Literacy gave him something no master could take away: hope. But hope was a dangerous thing for a slave. When he was 16, his owner sent him to Edward Covey, a man known as a slave breaker. Covey's job was simple: crush him, beat him into submission. And he did, whipped him until his back was raw, worked him until his body was nothing but pain, starved him until even hunger felt normal. For 6 months Frederick endured it, until one day he decided he would endure no more. When Covey came at him with his whip, Frederick fought back. They wrestled for 2 hours, Frederick, a boy with nothing to lose, and Covey, a man whose power was built on fear. And when the fight ended, Covey never touched him again. Frederick had won, not just the fight, but something deeper. From that moment on, he was no longer a slave in his mind. His body was bound, but his spirit was free. Escape was no longer a dream, it was a plan. In 1838, disguised as a sailor, he boarded a train headed north. Every second, every glance from a white man could mean discovery. But no one stopped him, no one asked questions. And when he stepped onto the streets of New York, the weight of a lifetime in chains fell from his shoulders. He took the name Douglass, and for the first time he was his own man. But freedom alone wasn't enough. He had to fight. He stood before crowds, his voice deep, commanding, filled with the fire of a man who had lived what others only debated. He wrote his autobiography exposing the horrors of slavery. He traveled to England where abolitionists bought his freedom so he could return safely to America. And then, the war came. The war that would decide the fate of his people. He met with Abraham Lincoln, urging him to let black men fight for their own liberation. He saw the Emancipation Proclamation signed. He watched as black soldiers, once considered less than men, marched into battle with their heads held high. Even after slavery was abolished, his fight never ended. He spoke of justice, of equality, of dignity. His hair turned silver, but his fire never faded. And in 1895, just hours before his death, he wrote his final words: "Without struggle, there is no progress." Frederick Douglass had been born in chains, but he died a free man, a warrior of words, a voice that would never be silenced.